You're still tuned in to Rubbin Minds. Before the break, we looked at the past 8 years of President Muhammadu Buhari's administration. Quite a lot was discussed. We looked at some of the improvements that were made in the areas of security, but as well as the challenges in the economy, in unemployment, in representation and inclusivity. In the next 24 hours, history is about to be made. We're going to be seeing a new president take up the helm of affairs in the person of Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and so many things are on the table already. The new president will have to deal with the debts that are piling up, a shaking economy, pervasive corruption, worsening disunity across Nigeria, and looking at that phenomenon of Japa, a lot of the best brains leaving the shores of this country seeking for a better future for themselves and their families. So we're now looking at the BAT presidency. What are the expectations of Nigerians? What would this government need to do differently to ensure that Nigeria reclaims its place as the giant of Africa and a formidable force within the international community? To contribute to this conversation, I have with me Joaquin McEbong, who is a senior governance analyst at Steers. Welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Thank you, Isabella.
And joining us via our Abuja studio, I have Tope Faswa, a public affairs analyst. Welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Yeah,
so let's go.
Isabella. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us on Rubbin Minds. So let's start the conversation looking at even the elections that just brought about the new administration that will come in from tomorrow. How credible would you say the elections were, and how trusting are Nigerians about the results that produced President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu?
Not very trusting, unfortunately. The issue of the Rivers State elections, for example, the presidential elections that happened there, showed a very large variance compared to what the votes that were declared by INEC, and the various investigations that were done by media outlets like Premium Times and BBC Africa that looked into the result sheets posted on IREV and then compared those with the declared results by INEC, and they showed a very wide variance. On top of that, the Peter Obi campaign has also put forward a number of states in which they feel that things did not go the way they were supposed to go. And if you bring all these together, actually, the issue of Rivers State alone and just the very wide variance in just one state can give many people the ammunition they need to say that the elections, for all the expectations and all the various reassurances that were given by INEC, just simply did not pass muster. Because to have that kind of wide variance, when you have BVAS, you had the IREV and so on, means that many people feel that a lot has really gone very, very, very wrong.
Okay, I'll move to Tope Faswa. Do you believe that Nigerians trusted the election process that is bringing in this new administration? And what can be done to build trust as we start this new chapter in Nigeria?
Okay, well, I usually say that it's not when you wake up that everybody wakes up. People who are just getting involved in the electoral process for the first time will probably, want to express shock, but it's because they're just waking up now. But for those who have been awake for a while, who have been following politics for quite a while in this country, they will tell you that this election is perhaps, in spite of the hiccups. Of course, you can't have a perfect election, not even in the United States or anywhere else, or in the UK or anywhere else in the world. We do have perfect elections. The issues around Joe Biden and Donald Trump's election, or between Trump and who was there the last time. So and Hillary Clinton. So at every point in time, you would always have issues around an election. Now, the gentleman there mentioned Rivers State. Rivers is only one out of 37 states in Nigeria. Whatever may have happened there, you can look at it, give or take. But, you know, the involvement of technology this time is increasing over time. And of course, this time with the beavers and what have you, I mean, at the end of the day, we couldn't get more than 25.2 million voters counted in one day. Before that, as 2003, it was 42 million. We counted 42 million somehow in 2003. In fact, what we had, 25.2 million, was lower than what we were able to count in 1993, 30 years ago. And I say that is the technology that's catching us out. However, if anyone wants a perfect election where everything goes fine and all of that, you know, I mean, you're kidding yourself. Because at the end of the day, political parties are what they are. And the stakes are really, really high, or stakes were really, really high this time around, such that, you know, you wouldn't expect that any one of them that could do one or two funny things under the table and get away with it, we will do. Every party is involved. Anybody that says that one party is holy and the other is not is basically being clever by half. So I think that's the way it has panned out. I think that if we look at the numbers, 42 million in 2003, okay, went down by 2007 to about 39 million, 2011 to 35 million.
Is voter apathy. Sorry to come in there.
Getting what you're getting.
When we look at the trend, we've seen voter apathy, and even the numbers even reduced when we moved to the state elections. The numbers that came in for, that showed up at the polls for the federal elections reduced by a great margin. And I believe that every administration will have to continue to look at improving the systems that are in place, ensuring that the right security structure are there to actually protect voters as they come out to cast their vote. But moving on, we're looking at the next 100 days in office. Joaquin, governments are always almost appraised by the public what they do in those first critical days. And in Nigeria, it's that first 100 days. What will you be looking? What are your expectations of a BAT presidency in the first 100 days?
The expectations of a Tinubu presidency depends on who you ask.
I'm asking you.
If you ask, I don't have any expectations per se.
Not even based on the Renewed Hope manifesto?
What I have are things I would look for to have expectations. I don't have any expectations. So the first thing, obviously, is the cabinet composition. You want to see who makes the cabinet. You want to see the antecedents of those who make the cabinet. You want to see the portfolios they are given. You want to know, for example, if there are round pegs in round holes, as opposed to square pegs in round holes. I don't know if you caught the news a couple of days ago that Adamu, who was education minister for 8 years, said he came to the portfolio not knowing anything about education. You simply cannot have this, right? You cannot have a situation where a critical human capital development portfolio like education goes to someone who is completely green. To have this is to invite problem, because interestingly enough, one of my favorite statistics about Nigeria today is that 25% of 7 to 14-year-olds in Nigeria don't have foundational reading or mathematics skills. That comes from somewhere. It comes from people not knowing what they are doing when giving education portfolios at federal or national level, at federal or state level. And so that's the first thing you're looking to do. Well, after that, you are looking to some of the other big decisions. You are looking for how the government is going to combat inflation, for example. You cannot go to a market every 2 weeks and see that things are continuing to rise and rise and rise. You want to see what they'll do about fuel subsidy. You want to see what they'll do about raising revenues in the short term. You want to see what they're going to do about increasing the domestic oil production in the short term as well to meet the OPEC quota of 1.7 million barrels per day that hasn't been met for the past 2 years or so. So you're looking for clues to all these things, but I think the first port of call is the cabinet composition. When the cabinet composition comes out, then we can have expectations, I think.
I'll move to Tokwe Faswa to get your own views on the expectations of Nigerians from this BAT presidency in the next 100 days. What should we expect based on the Renewed Hope manifesto?
It's very important to say that, okay, thank you very much. I think it's very important to say that, look, whether we like it or not, the incoming president actually won an election, and anything else should go to the courts. And therefore, if he did, that means that somehow more than 25% of people in more than, two-thirds of Nigeria actually believe in him. And, and that's a majority, whether we like it or not. So we have to run with that. And those people are expecting something. Ordinarily speaking, they're expecting that from the day he comes in, it's going to be nirvana for Nigeria. Everything is going to be all right. Usually, it doesn't work that way, okay? However, I would also expect that when the government comes in, yeah, are you saying something?
Yes,
I would expect that when the government comes in, they're also going to begin.
Go on.
I couldn't hear you though.
Go on.
Okay. When they come in, they're also going to embark on I expect that they'll get very sharp communicators and begin to manage expectations to let them know that, look, a government doesn't deliver from the day it comes in. However, people also want to see salutary impact and salutary effect. For example, one of the things that the government has said it will do is to remove this subsidy that's hanging on Nigeria's necks. And of course, we're paying between 6 to even 8 trillion on subsidies every year. And if we stop paying that, that will dovetail directly into revenue for government. And that means that they'll have more money to do stuff. However, how do they go about it? If we remove subsidy and fuel prices just go up and all of that. One of the suggestions I've made to them, for example, you can decide that you want to work on the payee law, the law on pay as you earn, such that any worker in the private or public sector gets a little something back. You can reduce a little here and there for them. A little benefit here and there. People are getting 10,000, 20,000 back in their income, net income. That is something. And if you do that, you've taken care of a vast, demographic. And then you can now say, okay, whatever else you're saving, if you're saving so much money on this subsidy, whatever else you're saving, you're now using it for transport infrastructure and what have you. Also, then people would then look at the promises of the government when they were coming in as a political party. Bola Tinubu's manifesto. One of the key things, the first things he mentioned was security. And he said he was going to set up what is called the Anti-Terrorist Battalion, ABAT. And when you look at that, what it means is jobs for the young people of this country. More people in intelligence, more people in policing, more people in the armed forces, more people in paramilitary, and what have you. Jobs. Hey, look, Nigeria is really very unmanned, if you like. Public services are not manned here. When I did my study years back, I realized that, in countries like Nigeria, we have 3-4% of people working in the public service. Of course, we don't want more people to go into public service, especially if they are going to be carrying files all up and down in federal secretariat. But you see, we've abandoned. If you listened yesterday to, I think it's Akumi Adesina in his lecture, that Nigeria's rural areas are totally abandoned, left in the lurch, left in the dark ages. We need government presence there. We need people to go there. We need mobilizers there in those places to make them feel like they're part of Nigeria. So I think that Nigerian people and Nigeria, whether you voted for Tinubu or not, you should be expecting that, look, opportunities for job and be on the lookout.
I'll have to come in here.
That's going to undo a lot of people.
You've given your view on the first 100 days, your expectations of Nigerians on the first 100 days of this new administration. I'll move to Joaquin, and I would like to pick up on what has come up in the conversation, which is the big thing around fuel subsidy and the removal, what its effects are. We've seen that in the last couple of days, weeks, we've seen some borrowing happening by this administration in the hopes that when fuel subsidy is removed, there will be palliatives for those who will be most affected, because once we have the prices of fuel go up, everything tends to go up with food prices, inflation. How do you think this government should handle this issue? And are the debts that have been borrowed enough to cushion the effects of this planned subsidy removal? So
there's two things. If you get money from the World Bank to give targeted intervention, you need to know where the people are, and you need to know how to reach them. It's not obvious to me that there is a database of people in the rural and urban areas where you are targeting the rural poor and the urban poor, to ensure that you can target them directly with many of these interventions. And the answer, one of the answers would be just basically a Naira rebate of some sort, going directly to their accounts and so on. But now it's not obvious to me that they have the infrastructure necessary to target that, particularly in the urban areas and in the rural areas. So that is one question. that I have. The other issue is how to remove it. Do you remove it at once, or do you remove it in phases? So you do it 4 times, 25%, and then you take it off the table over the period of a year. Personally, I think we should just go
cold turkey.
Just go cold turkey, and the reason is because there is a lot of smuggling that goes on. A lot of smuggling regarding where the petrol goes to when it comes into Nigeria. You may be aware that Nigeria has one of the lowest petrol prices in the world, and not just the lowest in the world. So like we are bottom 15 or so, but we also have the lowest prices in West Africa. So as soon as the petrol comes in, it goes to other places. It goes to Cameroon, goes to Niger, goes to Chad, and so on. And so by removing that price differential, that smuggling incentive disappears overnight. So you then begin to reckon with the precise number of liters of petrol that Nigerians actually consume on a day-to-day basis. So I think that on the one hand, it should probably go immediately, and then with the money left over, you then look at the targeted interventions that you can do using, again, a precise database of where the people who are most in need are. I should also add that the people who benefit most from subsidy are the middle class and the rich, because they're the people that have cars and so on. So we benefit from that by the most. For everybody else, transport prices are going to go up. So you need a way to somehow cushion those effects. So I think that if you can find a way to do that, then I think that the subsidy removal should be more or less in order.
Okay. Tokwe, I would like to move the conversation to infrastructure. We know that this administration under President Muhammadu Buhari has made a lot of strides in the construction of road network across Nigeria, building of bridges, rail network, and we've seen sort of a renewed energy when it comes to a lot of infrastructure being developed. What can we expect since we're seeing the same party moving to yet another next 4 years? So what can we expect from this new administration in terms of infrastructure?
Right, okay. But before I talk about infrastructure, 1 second about this issue of subsidy. So what I'm saying essentially is that I would also subscribe to the cold turkey idea of actually going. I just came back from Kenya a couple of days back, and of course, fuel price when I converted it was like 1,012 naira per liter, and I wonder how they're surviving. But they have a lot of small cars, 1.3 liter engines, perhaps 60% of the cars in Kenya. Here, we like all the big cars and what have you. So we need to start thinking. And however, I'm certainly not for this idea of collecting World Bank loan to share to so-called people who are poor. That is inflationary. You're just going to be, at the end of the day, you're going to come back full circle to where you were if I was. So I don't know where that harebrained idea came from. Even though if we could get a loan, we could invest it in transport infrastructure, which is going to impact on the lives of the people. And then, of course, in terms of managing inflation, there are moral suasion, there's better regulation that can be done perhaps in the agricultural sector and elsewhere to ensure that people don't take advantage. Because a lot of people are waiting to take advantage. This is a country where you increase fuel price by 5%, they will double the transport cost, on the streets, which, fuel is not the only thing that goes into transportation, for example, So that said, on the infrastructure, whereas I would give the government some kudos, the outgoing government, some kudos for some of what they've been able to achieve, for example, Second Niger Bridge and what have you. The truth is, look, in my view, we're being mediocre. We're being mediocre. We're talking about a bridge that we've tried to build for 20 years or more. The other time they mentioned Fourth Mainland Bridge. Some guys were saying, oh, they shouldn't. If they came in as governor in Lagos State, they will first of all cancel it. Are you saying Lagos doesn't need infrastructure? When population grows, you need more and more infrastructure. We go elsewhere, we see what they've done. So I would expect, of course, that the incoming government would also prioritize some of the projects that Buhari has started. You look at which one is, worthwhile and try and complete them. And look, we need to go full blast in this country. We need so much. If you look at what Wike was able to do in Rivers State, all of those bridges, that's what we should be doing in many of our states. Nothing is happening in most of our states in this country. Once you leave the capital, that's the end. And but you see, we need to begin to benchmark ourselves. Even within Africa, there's a lot going on. If you went to Morocco and see what those guys have been able to do, Rabat is like Europe. Even Casablanca, not to talk of some of the Tangiers. And so you feel like you're in Europe. In Egypt, in the north coast of Egypt, you leave Cairo, you see the same thing going on in Rwanda, in Kigali. So, I mean, look, and we call ourselves giants of Africa. So we need that sense of urgency, number one. And secondly, and most importantly, before I let you come in, we need to get Nigerians involved in infrastructure building. It's not about, oh, we call Julius Berger, we give everything Julius Berger. How many of our youths are getting involved? Or we go bring the Chinese. The Chinese, they come with their laborers and their foremen and all of that. We aren't getting involved. The young people of this country, the engineering students, engineering graduates, we need to start getting them involved. Even when they're from when they're in university, if we have this sense of urgency and understand what we need to build and understand that we have very little time, and this is what is going to involve the youth. The youth that seem to
end up creating jobs which will tackle underemployment.
In this way, you're going to pull them in and get them involved and get them to earn money as well.
Okay. I was saying that this will also create jobs and tackle underemployment and unemployment. On the one hand, you want to see foreign direct investment coming, but at the same time, you want to see the president and indeed the people will be working with find ways to stimulate the economy. What kind of policies should we be expecting to see? And some of the policies that we saw in the past 8 years that haven't been enforced, which ones do you feel that are that will pose an opportunity for the incoming government to really shine and get Nigeria working for everybody?
First of all, I don't think that there is any economic policy from the last 8 years that should be repeated. The border closure was a failure. The cash,
you mean the conditional cash transfer?
The cash redesign, the Naira redesign thing was a failure. A number of other interventions, the banning of items that are not eligible for Forex, catastrophic failure on all fronts. So I think that there are some indications that the new administration is going to move in a different direction. But the first thing, for example, is you cannot attract FDI if you don't have an exchange rate that is reflected, that has market fundamentals behind it. So this idea of our multiple exchange rates, the CBN has one exchange rate, it has another one for some other players in the space. Then there is the one on the parallel market. We need one exchange rate in order to have this foreign direct investment coming. And if we don't have that, because most multiple exchange rates are at the center of many of the issues that we are having with some operators like airlines, for example. The reason why some airlines have stopped coming to Nigeria is because of the difficulty they have in repatriating their legitimately earned funds. It is the reason why some other multinational companies have stopped operating in Nigeria. It is part of the reason. So all of these things, like the multiple exchange rates, they have to go. You have the various bans and silly tariffs on various goods and services that are not necessary and actually hold the economy back and prevent us from engaging with the world. All of those things and all of those constraints have to go. When they begin to go, then perhaps you could say that there is something positive ahead. But for as long as those restrictions and those restraints remain in place, then I don't think that we are going to see the growth that is so urgently needed.
Okay, I'll move to Tokwe. In terms of corruption, what kind of policies do we need to see? And are the EFCC, for example, the organizations that are tasked with the responsibility of dealing with corruption, do they need to be strengthened? What should this administration, the incoming administration, I beg your pardon, what should their focus be?
Okay, but before I talk about corruption, I just want to make a small comment about the issue of exchange rate and single exchange rate. The idea of a single exchange rate is a myth, actually. It's a mythology, actually. It doesn't happen anywhere in the world. However, the point is that elsewhere in the world, in economies that work, the government is not constantly talking about exchange rate. You let the market determine the exchange rate. But the market is going to give you different exchange rates. You get different exchange rate from one bank to another. Even in one bank, for two different transactions, you could get two different exchange rates. Even in a bureau de change,
be so large. Will the discrepancy be so large? Will we be having, say, 460 as much as 700?
Yes. Certainly not large. Certainly not large. But we get there. So the point is this: you go back to the official exchange rate is the INE window. The central bank must make sure that that I&E is where everything gets cleared. Okay. However, that I&E window is also very dynamic in a day. You get different prices going on in a day, up and down. That's the way exchange rate is set. The government is not supposed to be concerned about the black market. There's a black market everywhere in the world. However, when you're approaching the black market, you should be sure that you're going to an illegal market. So that market should be driven underground. And whoever wants to go there knows that, okay, anything you see, you're going to get. It's going to take a bit of time. We don't want people standing on the streets changing money. If people want to change money, you're going to your bank or you're going to a proper BDC that's going to collect documentation for any amount of money you're changing. That's the way it is. Now, in terms of corruption, so I'd rather that, okay, see, all this idea of EFCC, ICPC, and all of that, are splintered from the work of two agencies, the Auditor General and the police. The EFCC came out of the police. Most of what the ICPC is doing is what police used to do. In fact, many of the personnel are also from the police. But what we found out that the more we splintered some of these groups, the more the corruption has increased. So wherever, I would call for their abrogation, but at the end of the day, let them continue to do their work. But the incoming president said something. He said, listen, he believes that the way to tackle corruption, at least to reduce it, is to make people comfortable, for example. If we have something like, consumer credit, that you can buy a car without having to look for all of the money, you can get on a mortgage, and that is drawing in the banking sector to provide mortgages and all of that, that if people are not under those extreme pressure, there'll be less corruption. And what I think will be added is what I started with this, this program with, the idea of managing expectations and speaking to what matters to our people. What we found out with this government that's outgoing is that taciturn nature. And many times they are always coming back on the defensive. Listen, if government is not talking to the people about what to expect and how to live life and, the possibilities and all, what have you, people are going to go in different directions. So as much as you want to give consumer credit and bring the banks to do the right thing and actually finance people and what have you, a little bit on the credit side, you also want to be letting people know that, hey, we all don't need to own a house, for example. We all don't need to send our children to the best, most expensive schools and all of that. One of the things that's killing Nigeria is that
I'll have to come in there.
To send our children abroad.
I'll have to come in there.
And send our children to school abroad. It's killing us.
Tokwe, thank you. I'll have to come in there because I'd like us to touch on, just before we close the show, on the big one, which is security. By many accounts, Nigerians don't feel safe across Nigeria. It's no longer something that's targeted at or it's just in one part of the country, whether it's IPOB in the southeast, it's banditry in the north central, it's insurgency. There's kidnapping, killings going on. What does this government need to do to secure the lives and property of Nigerians?
In his manifesto, he says that he wants to employ many more police. I don't know if he gave a figure there, but he said he wants to employ many more police. Well, the issue there is that when you employ them, you need to train them, you need to pay them. And so the question is if they're going to be able to do both sufficiently and adequately to enable them keep the peace in multiple places of the country. The other issue is that they are going to have to find a way to operationalize state police and have detailed guidelines in place for states to adopt in a way that the state police is answerable, for example, to the House of Assembly and to the state judiciary instead of perhaps just the governor. So you don't want a state police to be essentially the lapdogs of the governor. You don't want it. You want the state police to actually take care of people who are going to be having the issues instead of focusing only on the governor alone. And then some of these issues around there as well.
To end it here, thank you very much, Joachim McEbong, who is a senior governance analyst with Steers, and our public affairs analyst who joined us via the Abuja studio, Tokwe Faswa. Thank you for your contributions on Rubbin Minds. Indeed, the incoming administration under President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu has its work cut out if it's to deliver on its promises in its renewed hope manifesto. And Nigerians in the next 24 hours will be watching and hoping for that renewed hope and a better Nigeria. Thank you for joining us on Rubbin Minds. My name is Isabella Adediji. Join us again next week.
Don't just stand